Welcome to the tutorial of SHARE. SHARE means Secure Information Sharing Framework for Emergency Management, and it is a platform to enforce flexible and controlled information sharing in emergency situations. The platform is provided with 3 default scenarios. These scenarios are healthcare scenario, natural disaster, and man-made disaster. First of all, we choose a scenario, in this case natural disaster. Then we log in as an emergency manager, in this case Sarah Flint. She has the role emergency manager, so she is able to create emergencies, regular policies, and emergency policy. First of all, we try to create a regular policy. The scenario is provided with a lot of regular policies. For example, these policies allow the rescuer to access the object provision with the privilege read and write. So we try to create a new policy. We give a name to the policy. We set the role, paramedic, the object, ambulance, the privilege, read write, and in this case we set no obligation. Then we create the policy. The policy is created, but a paramedic should access only ambulance for which he or she is the driver. So we add a filter. We disable the user condition. We set the object condition as ambulance driver equal to the current user and the attribute username. Then we add the filter. So if we log out and we try to log in as an ambulance driver, in this case Josh Griffin, this is his home page. He's a paramedic and he can access the object ambulance. If we click on the ambulance, we see only ambulance 2 because he is the driver of this ambulance. Then we log out. We log in again as Sarah Flint, the emergency manager, and we try to define an emergency policy. So first of all, we define an emergency. We add a new emergency. We give a name, in this case hurricane. Then we choose an input stream, in this case wind sensors. Then we set the condition of the emergency. So in this case I put 120, which means that the emergency starts when the wind speed is higher than 120 kilometers per hour. We set the timeout as infinity. The identifier is the location of the emergency, and we set also an obligation, which is emergency calls. Then we create the new emergency. This is a graphical representation of the new emergency. We have the input stream, wind sensors, the filter, which contains the condition I just inserted, and 2 output stream, one for the beginning of the emergency and the other one for the end of the emergency. Now we have defined the emergency, so we need to define the corresponding policy. In this case we add a new policy. We give the policy a name. We set the role, in this case DHS agent. We set the object, which is again the ambulance, privilege read, and in this case the obligation is to warn the driver. So when a not normally authorized user access the ambulance, the driver of the ambulance is warned. Now I connect the emergency hurricane with the DHS agent policy, and then I create the new emergency policy. This is the graphical representation of the emergency, but I want also to add a filter. So in this case, the DHS agent should see only the ambulance in the location of the emergency. So I disable the user condition and I set an object condition, which is ambulance location equal to the emergency and the identifier, which is the location of the emergency. Then I add the filter. And so now, as you can see, the emergency is disabled. So if I log out and I try to log in as a DHS agent, Tony Almeida, he's a DHS agent, but he can't see any object. Now, if I log out, log in again as Sarah Flint, I run a simulation of the emergency hurricane. So first of all, I add the simulation. In this case, the emergency starts when the speed is higher than 120. So I set 121 in the simulation. The emergency ends when the speed is lower than 120. So I set 100. The location, the identifier of the emergency, we can put location 2, and the value of the ambulance should be ambulance 2. So I create the simulation is added here, and now it is stopped. If I start the simulation, the emergency is started and the related emergency policy, which is this one, is now enabled. So if I log out and log in again as a DHS agent Tony Almeida, now I can see the object ambulance. If I click on the object, I can see only the ambulance 2 because the ambulance 2 is in location 2, which is the location of the emergency. And there is also an obligation, which is to warn the driver of the ambulance that somebody else, in this case Tony Almeida, has accessed information about his ambulance.